If they run.
Yeah.
This is Debbie and Michael's 1962 Volkswagen Beetle that Debbie's had since she was young. And they brought it here to Mirage Auto Painting for a restoration. When it came in, it was a rolling chassis. We've torn it down and started cleaning it up, and we're going to start fixing it and putting it back together. I want everybody to get a good look at it. Thank you.
My name is Michael Even. This is my wife, Debbie.
And we're talking about your 1962 Volkswagen. Tell me, Debbie, if you can tell me a little bit about the story about how you got the car.
I grew up in Juneau, and then I bought the car, I think in 1985, with my dad. We were out fishing and I heard on the radio someone had it for sale, and so I memorized the phone number, and we got home. I went ahead and called, and we went over there and bought it. I was pretty excited. I paid $550 for it. I couldn't drive it home because the brakes were not working, and so my dad had to drive it home while I followed behind. We put it in the garage. We did a bunch of work on it. I drove it my senior year of high school and the year after. Lots of ups and downs with it.
I remember vaguely the first time you told me the story, something about babysitting money.
Oh yeah. I babysat a lot, and I just always stashed my money in a little box in my room, and my dad kind of laughed at me and said, you can't afford a car, what are you going to do? And I pulled out all my money, and he kind of, shockingly said, okay, so we'll get the car, and then we're also going to get a bank account because this isn't okay.
All right, so if you could only use one word to describe how you felt when you first drove this car, what would that word be?
Oh my gosh, I was so proud and ecstatic. I loved this bug, and it was just an adventure from the very first time I ever drove it.
All right. It's a manual.
Uh-huh.
So had you driven a manual before?
I did. We had an Audi, and I drove that Audi and learned actually to drive on a manual, so
sure.
I was one of my only few friends could do that, yeah.
Right.
So
Sharon said, are there any songs that come to mind that you played when you drove this car? Because we usually have a connection between cars and songs.
Oh man, the 80s, because I didn't have a radio in there, so I had a little cassette player, and it was tiny. I got this little mini one, and so we were popping tapes and batteries constantly to play music in there. Man, what were we listening to though? That's tricky. I listened to a lot of Cyndi Lauper. I listened to the Thompson Twins. I don't think the Chili Peppers were out then, but yeah, I probably could pull out my tapes.
Early MTV music.
Yeah, I was a big MTV fan. I lived on MTV.
So, having crawled around it a little bit, I see it's got a few mishaps that have happened in its life, and my thought is that every dent has a story. Is there one that you want to share?
No, I didn't do any of it.
Really?
No, I think one time I was driving on a rainy night and a car pulled out in front of me, and I ditched to avoid the car and banged up the front right panel or the corner just a little bit.
All right.
Had to bang that back.
It had a rough life then before you.
It did have a rough life before me.
What was the last year you drove the car?
I drove the car in 1987.
So it's been parked all that time? It's
been parked, yeah. So in 1987, I moved to Fairbanks, and I went to go to college, and yep, my dad, he put it in the garage, and he and then my brother had this grand plan to redo it while I was at school, and this is as far as they got.
So when did they first tear it down? Because when I saw it, it had already been, the paint had been stripped off, fenders were off of it. Still rolling.
It was probably 88.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's been stripped for a long time.
All right. You told us this car has sentimental value. Why do you want to restore it? I mean, you just want that feeling of driving it again, or?
It's my first car. It's my first car, and I feel like I kept it this long, and it reminds me of my dad, and it makes me happy, and so, yeah, I mean, there's not really a better reason than that, I don't think.
So, if you could change one thing in this car from the original manufacturer to modern day, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, the clutch always gave me hell, so I was always messing with the clutch. I didn't ever have heat, so heat was always a problem. I was always scraping the windshield with my little scraper, and I always had a blanket on when I drove it, even in Juneau. And so, yeah, maybe some heat would be nice.
We're going to work on that.
Yeah.
All right. What was your husband's first reaction to restoring this car?
Reaction? His reaction?
Or was it his idea?
It was his idea.
Okay.
Well, I tell you what, one of the fondest memories that I have of her telling me about the car is when she was driving it in Juneau. She had a group of friends that had Jeeps, and she would chase the Jeeps all over, up and down hills and through holes and mud holes and gravel roads and stuff like that. And I couldn't believe at the beginning that she actually kept up with them. But I mean, I think that's some reason why the car looks like it does now.
Well, there's a lot of advantage to having all the weight over the drive wheels
Yeah.
and having it's a Positrack basically. So I have the Jeep, but I know from my own Volkswagen experiences, those things will go just about anywhere. All right, guys, is there anything you want to add?
You know, one thing about this car is that, like, we picked it up from Juneau. It had been sitting in that garage for 20-some years. We brought it all the way from Juneau. We put it in our garage, and it sat there for the last 3 or 4 years. And we kind of came to the conclusion that we were either going to restore it or rid ourselves of it. And because, I mean, garage space is valuable,
Yeah,
right?
especially up here.
But so after some considerable thought, we decided we were going to fix it up. Her first car, a lot of sentimental value. She mentioned the other day when we dropped it off, you guys kind of converged around it. We're looking at it, and she said that it kind of reminded her of her dad when she saw everybody kind of paying attention to it.
That's cool.
And brought tears to her eyes. So
Good.
I mean, at that point, the deal was sealed.
Well, I'm very thankful that you brought it to us because I love working on these things. I'm really enjoying it, and I hope that I do a job to do it justice. So,
Well,
thank you.
we're real proud of you for taking the job on, because you could have just said nah, and the first thing you said was this thing is rough, and that kind of scared us to begin with. So,
Well, they're all a lot of work, but it's kind of like we were talking earlier. You got to kind of set an expectation of what you want in the end.
right?
And we want you to have a nice car that you can enjoy driving,
Yeah.
show off to your friends and all the people around Anchorage, and we can do that.
That's what we're gonna do, I think.
All right, guys, thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thanks.